Welcome back to the IBFP. Here's your host, Boxing News.
Men lie, women lie, but the facts don't lie. ESPN is garbage truck juice. You know, Terrence Bud Crawford is nowhere near pound for pound number one. He'd be lucky to be considered pound for pound number two. Canelo Alvarez is number one pound for pound, and there's no one close to this man. This man is so far ahead of everybody else on this list, and anybody that thinks different is either one of two things. Either is a fanboy or is delusional of the facts. Let's just be honest and unbiased. You know, I must have gotten thousands of questions requesting us to break down this situation between Crawford and Canelo. And this is what disgusts me about boxing. This is what makes me sick about boxing. The fact that this isn't even an argument. The fact that there's anybody that would say different when you see the facts. You see the facts. Why would anybody think that Terrence Crawford, whose resume is proverbial trash, compared to Canelo Alvarez, that it's even close? Like, it's sad. And Terrence Crawford's a great fighter. He's an elite fighter. You know, he's won belts in multiple weight classes. He's been undisputed, but he's never fought an elite fighter. When you've never fought an elite fighter, we don't know how good you are. We don't know how great you are because you've never fought somebody who's truly elite. This guy has always faced people that are either washed or paper champions. Let's just be real about the situation. And you know, at the end of the day, Canelo Alvarez is an elite level fighter because he's fought elite level fighters. That's the difference between Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Bud Crawford. Let's just be real. ESPN came out with this garbage list, and they state that, you know, Canelo Alvarez made a push for the top spot, but Bud Crawford remained the king of ESPN.com. ESPN is no longer allowed to speak or talk boxing and be taken credibly. They're no longer a credible organization when it comes to boxing, period, because they are always going to put their fighters number one. And this is what Terrence Crawford only became the number one pound for pound fighter after Vasyl Lomachenko got beat. That's the only reason. This is the only reason. And if Terrence Crawford gets beat, they're going to put Teofimo up there. Let's be honest and unbiased about it. At the end of the day, these guys are always put up and pump up their fighters. They're never honest about it. They're just promoting their fighters. They're a business making business decisions. Every other boxing outlet, commentator, journalists, all have Canelo Alvarez as number one in the ring. World Boxing News, Dan Raphael, Mike Coppinger, they all state Canelo Alvarez is number one without a shadow of a doubt. It's not close. Even Terrence Crawford, old mama, doesn't believe that this man is pound for pound number one over Canelo Alvarez. But you got all these fanboys out here pumping this garbage up. At the end of the day, if you believe Crawford is number one pound for pound number one, you are simply a fanboy or delusional or even both, because the facts won't lie. This is how biased ESPN is. They had Terrence Crawford number two pound for pound, last year after beating a washed Amir Khan. Amir Khan has been on his back more than a hooker from Nebraska. Let's just be honest and unbiased. I mean, the top two spots at this time were on the ESPN pound for pound list were dominated by ESPN fighters. They gave Bud number two pound for beating a washed Amir Khan? That's garbage truck juice. You can't take these guys serious. Canelo Alvarez was pound for pound number one back then. We got to be real. Even Vasyl Lomachenko had never faced an elite fighter. This is the same Vasyl Lomachenko that lost to a low-level fighter in Orlando Salido at the time. You can't even make a comparison with Canelo Alvarez. This guy is so far ahead of these guys, but they're being biased. They're disrespecting Canelo Alvarez because he's not on ESPN. If he was on ESPN, they'd be on their knees sucking this man off. Let's just be honest and unbiased. And a lot of people ask me, well, they're both great fighters. They are. Terrence Crawford's still a great fighter. Canelo Alvarez is a great fighter. But what's the main difference between these two? What's the big difference? The big difference is Canelo Alvarez is an elite fighter fighting elite fighters. Terrence Crawford has never fought an elite fighter. He simply has not. This guy has opened up a can of tomato soup his entire career. This man is not facing elite fighters. Not one. You can't name one. He's either facing washed out versions of fighters or paper champion. He's never faced one truly elite fighter. You simply can't name it. Who is his his best fighter? Answer that, then slap yourself. Let's be honest. I mean, the guy, ESPN gave this man #1 pound for pound for facing a Wash Kell Brook in his last fight. Wash Kell Brook makes you the #1 pound for pound fighter in the world. This is a Kell Brook who looked like he walked off the set of The Walking Dead. Why did this man come into the fight looking like he was off The Walking Dead? This is a Kell Brook that hasn't made the welterweight division in 3 years. This is a Kell Brook who said, I would never want to come back to the welterweight division. This is that Kell Brook. This is that Kell Brook who had 2 facial surgeries, 2 knockout losses. This is that Kell Brook. See, people got to be honest and unbiased. And who did Canelo Alvarez just face coming off a pandemic and a year layoff? Who was it? An undefeated world champion in his prime and the World Boxing Super Series winner, and a guy with a height and reach advantage, almost an 8-inch reach advantage. And yet you're going to give, Terence Crawford pound for pound 1 over Canelo Alvarez for facing a washed out Walking Dead zombie? And Kell Brook, are you serious? ESPN is garbage truck juice. We already know what these guys are not reputable. These guys are not speaking facts. These guys are in their feelings, and only fanboys agree. If anybody around you or any boxing channel agrees with this, they're officially a fanboy channel. Facts do not agree with them. Facts do not resonate in their head. I mean, look, this is Terence Crawford, and a lot of people say, well, he had no one else to fight. No one else will fight him. Sean Porter would have fought him. And a lot of people say, well, Kell Brook beat Sean Porter, didn't he? Listen, moron. Kell Brook beat Sean Porter, 7 years ago? 7 years ago? And look, at the end of the day, Kell Brook has been knocked out twice since then. Kell Brook has had 2 facial surgeries since then. Kell Brook hasn't fought in the welterweight division in over 3 years since then. So if you think those are the same fighters, you're just delusional and stupid. At the end of the day, even Terence Crawford said he thought Sean Porter beat Errol Spence in their last fight. So when you say that Sean Porter, who had become a world champion since then and arguably beat Errol Spence according to Terence Crawford, wouldn't you think that Sean Porter would be a great litmus test for a guy like Terence Crawford, who's in desperate need to showcase his skills to the world, that he's finally faced an elite fighter that's not washed? Wouldn't that make sense? But he told Sean Porter, hey, now's not the time for the fight. And a lot of people don't believe me. Oh, no, Sean Porter was bluffing. Okay, well, according to the Lance Pugmire and Mike Coppinger podcast, they spoke on it, and here's what they said.
Situation. I mean, I talked to Terence Crawford about it, and he said, look, point blank, I wasn't willing to take a significant pay cut to even discuss a fight with his friend Sean Porter.
Boom! And so now you even see that Terence Crawford didn't even want to smoke with Sean Porter. See, no one's making him face out washed out fighters like Kell Brook. He chose that. We got to be honest and unbiased about it. This is Terence Crawford 3 years ago knocked out an Uber driver to become undisputed. It's the level of competition. I give him credit for the accolade of becoming undisputed, but you still didn't face an elite level fighter, a top level fighter. You open up a can of tomato soup and became undisputed against an Uber driver. Let's just be real about it. Terence Crawford has never faced an elite fighter. This guy's resume is trash when you compare it to Canelo Alvarez. I mean, he's living on accolades from 3 years ago, while Canelo Alvarez is still making history. He's the 4th fighter in Mexican history to become a 4-division world champion. But no one is acknowledging this. No one is appreciating this. This guy is making history. Even Terence Crawford came out and said, I still view Jeff Horn as my biggest welterweight win. You view Jeff Horn as your biggest win? That's garbage truck juice. Name one of these fighters that Jeff Horn is better than. Is he better than Danny Jacobs? Is he better than Callum Smith? Is he better than Sergey Kovalev? Because all 3 of those guys were world champions when Canelo Alvarez beat them. All 3 of them had a height and reach advantage over Canelo Alvarez. Just one of these guys is better than everybody on Terence Crawford's resume, and that's facts, not feelings.